This deck might just be the best way to play Snake Eye. It's time for Infernoids. What's potion? You got Matt here, and welcome back to another competitive Yu-Gi-Oh video. Today I want to showcase a deck that is actually pretty underrated and one of the better ways to play all these fire decks in the format right now. And that's going to be Infernoid. The Inferno deck has seen a lot of success in the OCG over the past few months, and it's going to be getting some new support in the TCG in the coming weeks. For those of you who don't know, the Infernoids have a ton of really powerful effects, but also have really heavy restrictions on them as well, but we'll get into that a bit later. So if you're excited for the video, then make sure to smash the like button. If this video hits 250 likes, I'll bring you an awesome Infernoid combo guide with test hands. Also, if you like competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, including deck profiles, combo guides, meta discussions, and videos just like this one, you're gonna love this channel, so make sure to subscribe. But with that being said, here's the best Infernoid deck profile for the post-Phantom Nightmare competitive Yu-Gi-Oh format. Let's jump into it. So this deck profile is going to be a little bit different because I don't actually have all the Infernoid cards, which makes sense because the deck is incredibly expensive. But it is one of the most fun decks to play in the format right now and can play through so many different cards while establishing a crazy end board. And when Battles of Legend Terminal Revenge releases, it's going to get more support, which makes it even more powerful. But what I am going to do is explain why these cards are seeing play, explain why the ratios are what they are, go over why the deck is so strong, and of course show you why the deck can be even better than pure Snake Eyes or Snake Eye Fire King. Now let's get this out of the way. This is a fire deck with a level 1 fire monster that is really strong, so obviously we're playing the Wanted package, which makes a ton of sense. 3 copies of Diabellstar and 3 copies of Wanted are all needed to play this deck effectively. They're both 1-card starters that require any other card to get them online. 1 original Sinful Spoils is necessary for the combo, but the Divine Temple should also be considered for a few reasons. First, it's really good in the mirror match to take control of the opponent's monster that they place in the spell and trap zone. But second is that it helps you play a bit more after getting interrupted by placing monsters in the spell and trap zone that you can then later use if your combo is stopped. It's not mandatory to play the field spell, but I really like it for some niche cases, and it helps in the grind game, and it's searchable with Poplar. Speaking of Poplar, we're playing 2 copies of Poplar along with the 3 copies of Ash and the 1 Oak. This is all incredibly standard so far, but we're also playing only 1 copy of Flamberge Dragon. In a pure Snake Eye deck, you really want to have 2 copies of Flamberge, but in this one here, you only need the 1 copy. There are some Infernoid decks that you can really use 2 copies of this to do other combos, including Calamity locking your opponent, but the Snake Eye engine is so powerful that when you combine it with the Infernoids, it's hard to have your board broken, so it can be a little bit win more. And obviously, because it's a fire deck, you're definitely going to be playing 3 copies of Bonfire. This card is absolutely insane for the strategy, as well as the 1 copy of 1-for-1 because it gets you into both of your engines. But anyways, that's it for the Snake Eye cards. Now let's move on to the more interesting part of the deck, being the Infernoid engine. I mentioned this earlier, but the Infernoids have a lot of heavy restrictions on them, but you can also divide them into 3 separate categories. There's the big Infernoids, the middle Infernoids, and the small Infernoids. The big Infernoids are the level 9 Deviati and the level 10 Anunku. The middle ones are level 5, 6, 7, and 8. They are Piatti, Sajet, Saitsamas, and Atondal. And the small ones are levels 1 to 4. They are Pyramus, Antra, Harmodic, and Petrulia. There is one more Infernoid, but it's not like the others, and we'll talk about that one a bit later. All the Infernoid monsters share the effect where they can't be normal summoned or set, and they must be special summoned by banishing a certain number of Infernoids from your hand or graveyard. The big ones need you to banish 3, the middle ones 2, and the small ones you need to banish 1. So already that's a really high investment requirement, but they also are even more restricted than that. They can only be special summoned this way while the total levels and ranks of all effect monsters you control are 8 or lower. So this means that it's really hard to summon out one of the middle ones or higher while you already have one on field. The other Infernoid monster that I didn't mention earlier is Infernoid Decatron. This card is the reason why this deck is playable. It is absolutely insane. First of all, there is not a single mention of once per turn anywhere on this card, and you can easily cycle it at least 3 times in a single turn. On normal or special summon, it Foolish Burials an Infernoid monster. It then gains its level, and it also changes its name and its effect to the one of the card that it sent. Not only is it searchable off of something like Snake Eye Ash, but you can also special summon it with the effects of Oak, Flamberge Dragon, or original Sinful Spoils. It's also great at getting extra negation on the field, and on top of that, it just so happens to be a tuner. So obviously we're playing Decatron at 3 copies. It's an amazing card that can do so much for the strategy, but you definitely need a lot more Infernoids to make it work. So what other Infernoids are we actually playing in the strategy? We'll start off with 2 copies each of Deviati and Anunku, the 2 big ones. Starting off with Deviati. When it's special summoned, it's a heavy storm except for void spells and traps. Also, as a soft once per turn, when a monster effect is activated, you contribute 1 monster as cost and negate the activation, and if you do, banish it. Anunku is very similar. When it's special summoned, it's Dark Hole except for itself. And as a soft once per turn, when a spell, trap card, or effect is activated, you contribute 1 monster as cost and negate the activation, and if you do, banish it. Unfortunately, we have to play Anunku and Deviati at 2 copies each because the Infernoid fusion needs these 2 cards as material. Also, Decatron copying the effects of these cards is really important, so if Decatron copies the effects, it becomes either a negate for monsters or back row. We then play 4 other Infernoids, each with different levels. 1 of the level 8 Atondel, the level 7 Saitsumas, the level 6 Sajet, and the level 2 Antra. Just a reminder that all of these but Antra need to banish 2 Infernoids to summon themselves, and Antra can only summon itself from the hand by banishing 1 Infernoid monster. All 4 of these monsters share the effect that you contribute 1 monster and target a card in your opponent's graveyard and banish it. So they're all quick effect DD Crows. They all have other effects as well, but they're really not that impressive. It's mostly for level modulation with Decatron. Atondel can attack again if it destroyed a monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard. Saitsumas, if it attacks a monster, at the end of the battle phase, it can non-target banish a card on the field. For Sajet, if it attacks, you can make your opponent banish 1 monster from their extra deck, and Antra can target a face-up card your opponent controls and return it to the hand. So basically we're playing 8 Infernoid monsters with 3 copies of Decatron. Now listen, Infernoids have a really high chance of bricking, and for that reason we have to make sure we reduce that chance. To do so, we actually increase the size of our deck count. So instead of playing 40 cards, we're actually playing 50. But I haven't even gotten to the best part about playing this deck. One of the real reasons why you play this strategy is because of the void spells and traps, which are honestly incredible. Void Banishment is a searcher for the strategy. You can discard a card and add a void spell or trap from deck to hand, but you get locked into Infernoids, and it has an effect in the battle phase, but it rarely comes up. Not only is it a great searcher, but because it discards cards from your hand to the graveyard, it can turn on all the Infernoid monsters and get them out of your hand. We're playing Banishment at 3 copies because it gets us to either of the other void spell or traps that we really need, depending on the situation. Speaking of which, we play 1 each of Void Feast and Void Imagination. Void Feast is the trap card, and it is insane. Basically, you're sending 1 void spell or trap from your hand or face-up field to the graveyard as cost to special summon up to 3 Infernoids from your deck whose levels equal exactly 8. So in a perfect world, you summon out 2 level 1 Decatrons and a level 6 Sajet. The 2 Decatrons then send 1 each of the Anunku and the Deviati, meaning this 1 card in Feast gives you a spell and trap negate, a monster negate, and a DD Crow on legs. And it's because of how good Feast is that we actually place Sajet in the list. Void Imagination is the deck's fusion spell, but it's so much more than that. Firstly, all Infernoids become level 1, so it helps bypass the level restriction that they all have. But you can also send this card from the field to the graveyard to fusion summon 1 Infernoid monster. You can use your hand or field for the materials, but if your opponent has a monster special summon from the extra deck, you can also use up to 6 Infernoids from your deck. So this becomes an amazing card going second because it fills your graveyard up with powerful cards. It helps you set yourself up for a Dark Hole with a Nunku or a Heavy Storm with Deviati. So basically, Banishment searches for Feast going first and Imagination going second. That's it for the Infernoids in this strategy. It's 16 cards that pair really well with the Snake Eye monsters. The rest of the deck is non-engine, and you're more than welcome to make adjustments as you see fit, but I personally like 3 copies of Ash, 3 Nibiru, 3 Droll, 3 Imperm, and then 2 copies of Talents with 1 copy of Call by the Grave, which brings our total to 50 cards exactly. The extra deck though is very standard Snake Eye stuff. We have Linkaribo, IP, SP, Sunlight Wolf, Hida, Dark, Promethean Princess, Amawale, Appaloosa, and Typhon. The rest of the extra deck though is slightly different because we're playing 1 copy of Barone because you can easily make it with the Decatron. If Decatron sends Antra, it becomes a level 3, which means it and Diabellstar works. If Decatron sends Atondel, it becomes level 9, which means it works with the level 1 Snake Eye monsters. It's actually pretty common to get into Barone with this list. We then have 4 fusion monsters, starting off with the 1 of Infernoid Tierra. Tierra is what we're summoning off of the effect of Void Imagination. It requires both big Infernoids and 1 or more Infernoid monsters. When it's fusion summoned, depending on the number of Infernoids with different names used to summon it, it can use different effects. If you use 3 or more Infernoids, each player sends 3 cards from their extra deck to the graveyard. If 5 or more were used, each player mills 3 cards. 8 or more, each player returns 3 cards from their banish zone to their graveyard. And 10 or more, each player sends their whole hand to the graveyard. We really only use the first effect, and it's pretty rare to use the second effect, and it's actually impossible in this list to use the last 2 since we only play 7 different names. The Snake Eye extra deck is already really tight, and if they've gone through their main combo, they have a limited resources left, so forcing them to send 3 more cards to the graveyard is great to stop their recovery. But it's also really good because you can send powerful cards from your extra deck to the graveyard, cards like Entis to pop a card on the field, and Garura to get a draw. And what's really important about that is you can chain block their effects too. So because of that, we play 1 each of the Entis and the Garura in the extra deck. The last card in the extra deck is also the 1 copy of Muddragon of the Swamp, which is there for Super Polymerization. Speaking of Super Poly, let's talk about the side deck. Super Poly is a great card in the side deck for this matchup because number 1, you're already playing a copy of Garura in the extra deck for the Infernoid Tierra, so adding in a copy of Muddragon of the Swamp is really nice, and on top of that, the discard that Super Poly has gets your Infernoid names into the graveyard to be easily banished or summoned back. Forbidden Droplet is also really solid because of the effect negation, but also because it gets your Infernoid names into the graveyard, and because of the attack halving as well, you can easily go for game with your big monsters. I'm also playing 3 copies of Ghost Bell and 3 copies of Cosmic Cyclone, which are great because a lot of the time in the matchups you're going to be playing, the hand traps you have in your main deck aren't always going to be great, so I want to replace them with cards that are going to be a bit more valuable. The last 3 cards in the side deck are the 1 copy of Sinful Spoils of Subversion, which is a great way to have non-destruction forms of removal, and the last card is going to be the last 2 copies of Void Imagination, which is great going second. So this is the list right over here, and honestly it's a really strong option in this format because a lot of the time you don't need your normal summon when playing in a Snake Eye deck. So if you start your turn off by normal sending a copy of the Decatron to send a copy of the Deviati for a monster negate, that is absolutely huge to be able to get that and continue your plays going that way. There are a few other cards you can consider playing in this strategy, the first of which is going to be a small Fire King package, including 2 copies of the Kirin, 1 Garunix, 1 Arvada, 1 Ponix, as well as 1 each of the Field Spell, the Continuous Spell, and of Circle as well. Circle is actually really good because you can get back a copy of Decatron to use its effects and get an extra negate online, which is also really cool. If you really want to, you can play Salmon Great Raging Phoenix and World Sea Dragon Zealantis as well in the extra deck to be able to get the OTK online, but honestly the deck doesn't really need it because all the monsters have insanely high attack stats. And the last card being considered was actually Underworld Goddess of the Closed World. The extra deck is just pretty tight, and if you're playing Super Poly, it makes it really tough, but if you're not playing Super Poly, it's a great option as well. And that's going to wrap it up for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this new style of deck profile that I'm bringing out to you guys. If you didn't, let me know why in the comments below, and if you did, let me know why as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts so I can keep improving and getting better. I do have a few things I want to mention though about this deck before I finish up though, because firstly, this deck is incredibly expensive. All the fire-based cards like the Wanteds, the Diabell Stars, the copies of Bonfire are all incredibly expensive, but when you add in all the Void spells and traps, specifically Void Banishment and Void Imagination, those cards are at least $15 a copy and you need 6 of them, so that's another $100 being added to the tally right there. I also want to say that I am by no means the creator of this deck. I actually have a buddy at Locals who's been playing Infernoid for a while now and been performing really well with it. After all, it is his pet deck and it got some really nice support with the fire cards. So I want to thank him for giving me the inspiration for this video. But anyways, if you made it this far in the video, you must have enjoyed it, so make sure to smash the like button. Remember, if this video hits 250 likes, I'll bring you an awesome combo guide with test hands for this Infernoid deck. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter and join the Discord server. Both are linked in the description, and of course subscribe to the channel as well. We're on the road to 10,000 subscribers and we can't get there without your help. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next time.